through John's Gospel. We're up to chapter 5 now, chapter 5 of the Gospel of John, speaking truth to power. And we are at chapter 5, I say, speaking truth to hypocrisy. So we have here John chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. So I will start off reading this. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, blind, lame, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. So here we see once again the scene has shifted very, very rapidly. In John chapter 4, he is in Samaria. He's on his way back home to Galilee in the north. There he spends some time in Galilee. There's another gap in the narrative, because in John chapter 5 opens with Jesus back in Jerusalem. So one of the things that we understand in these narratives, the gospel narratives, as I've stated before, that these narratives were not written as to be detailed biographies of the who, what, where, and when of Jesus' life, but these are all written to communicate certain thoughts and certain ideas. One thing that is helpful, it's something that I've used, but you don't have to use this particular one, but if there are study guides that are called a harmony, where they harmonize or put together the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They put them together into a single narrative so that it kind of fills in a lot of the gaps. There's still gaps there, but it helps you to get within context of what's taking place. So what happened between the end of chapter 4 of John and the beginning of chapter 5, some of that can be filled in with what was taking place or what was described in the other Gospels. So again, there are certain events that John is highlighting here, which have to do with the purpose of his narrative, which is to show that by Jesus' words and actions that he is indeed the way, the truth, and the life, and that he has the Son of God has come. And so this is the purpose of John's narrative, and every story that he tells is going to help to weave that story to reinforce and to build upon the purpose for which he is writing this gospel narrative. Now, one of the things that's interesting about this whole event here that takes place at the pool, at this pool of Bethesda, is for a long time these Bible scholars thought that this narrative was a creation of John, that this place, this pool of Bethesda didn't exist. So it must have meant something else, that it might have been either a complete fabrication or was intended as an allegory. But however, in the late 19th century, archaeologists, they discovered the site of this pool in Jerusalem, and they excavated the site. So they realized that that this is historical narrative, that is an actual place that Jesus would have visited, according to John, what John had described at that time. One of the interesting things about this pool was the archaeologists were trying to figure out, well, what was what was the purpose of this pool? Why was it there? Why was it being used? Some believe that it was an ancient Jewish mikvah, which is a ritual place where they take a cleansing bath. That it was for purification purposes, and but there's no indication anywhere from any of the literature that we have or the commentary that the Jewish people had made concerning their religion and concerning the mikvah and its purposes. There was no indication that there should be any kind of supernatural power from one of these ritual places where baths were taken. As the archaeologists dug into the site further, they found some very interesting facts about this pool. And when we add these facts to our understanding of these pagan healing pools at the time of John's narrative, we have a much deeper understanding of what Jesus wanted to communicate to all those who believed him at this moment. I'm going to go into this a little bit further, but for right now, we're just going to look at this particular miracle in context of the other recorded Sabbath day miracles or healings that Jesus performed. So John and the other gospels combined, when you combine all the four gospels together, you see this. There are 7 specific times that are mentioned where Jesus heals someone on a Sabbath. And in this chapter, John describes the first Sabbath miracle that Jesus performs near the temple. And there's a reason for this, a purpose for this, and to understand that by performing this Sabbath miracle at this particular place on this day, at this place in Jerusalem, it's going to immediately draw the attention to the religious leaders, and what's going to set up the next confrontation that Jesus has with them. So this pool called Bethesda, which was just inside the city. Now, at the time of Jesus, it was probably just right at the gate, maybe just outside the gate, and there's a reason for that, and I'll explain that in a moment also. But eventually, as the city of Jerusalem grew, they expanded the walls, and then this became inside the city. And that's this important point, but we'll get to that later also. So the pool was described as having 5 covered porches surrounding it, and it was known to many to be a place where people came for healing. So it was known at that time as a healing place. And every day the crowds of sick people would come, and with any kind of mysterious ailment or whatever, this sick man had been unable to walk since birth. And the people were there, they were waiting for some kind of supernatural movement of the water, which was caused evidently by some angelic being. And they don't know exactly what all this is about, but there's nothing in any Jewish literature about anything like this. So certainly there's something about this that's involved. And so all the infirm they flocked to this place because they believed that when the angel came and disturbed the water, that a healing would take place. So now the narrative continues here. Now, a certain man was there who had an infirmity of 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been in that condition a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I'm coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed and walked, and that day was the Sabbath. So here we have this person who has been waiting by the pool, been sick for 38 years. He says, "Well, I can't get in the pool in time. There's no one here to help me to get into the pool." So Jesus could see that the man had been ill for a long time. He asked him what seemed to be a pretty obvious question, which is, do you want to be made well? And of course, obviously you would think that he would say, yeah, well, of course I want to be healed. But the man, in the sick man's mind, he was so focused on the way healings had happened in that particular time and place, that all he could say was he had no one to help him into the pool when it was stirred up. There are many reasons why a person is not able to receive a supernatural healing. But the root cause, or one of the root causes that is often there, is unbelief. A person may not believe that they can be healed because their doctors or their caretakers or someone else has reinforced the idea that their condition is incurable. So others have been convinced that God is no longer able to heal in our day. Well, that was back then. God, Jesus healed people back then, and the apostles did, but the healing miracles have ceased in our day. The man that Jesus encountered here, it's obvious that he believed in a divine healing. If he didn't believe in divine healing, he would not have been there hoping for a miracle. So unbelief was not his issue there. But what the issue for him was this process of healing that was taking place there. And so the Jesus question, asking him, do you want to be made well? That question took his mind off of this process of healing. That's what Jesus' intention was. And so if he wanted to be healed at that moment, then he had to realize that nothing stood between him and Jesus, who had the power to heal him. See, Jesus needed no dramatics to heal this man. He simply said to the man, rise, take up your bed and walk, a simple commandment. And instantly the man felt well again and strong enough, so he was able to do what Jesus commanded him to do. You compare this with many of our modern day healers today, who often try to create a conductive atmosphere where to elevate the mood of their audiences, with special lighting and emotional music. They tell stories of previous healing miracles, and oftentimes they use props like empty wheelchairs or discarded crutches on their stage, or they can move suggestive people to believe that a miracle has happened, and so the power of suggestion or mass hysteria may have led them to claim that healing miracle that had taken place when a miracle from the Lord had not taken place. So later, now in the story, as the story continues, you see that later Jesus finds this man worshiping at the temple, and he says, see, I've made you well, sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. So now we begin to understand the story and the background of the story and what's going on. Now, I don't have time to go into the detail and the great details of this pool and what was going on there. I covered them in detail in two of the books that I wrote on healing. One is our Jehovah Rapha, and the other is are the healing miracles of the Bible. And I wrote in detail about this whole pool at Bethesda. That was actually a pagan temple. It was a pagan temple to the Greek god Asclepius, who is the god of healing. And there are, from the excavations of that place, there are indications that this is exactly what it was. And again, I wish I could go into detail about that here, but there's just no time on this. But an Asclepion is a temple to the god Asclepius, the Greek god of healing. And it was it's usually done in a particular way. And the pool of Bethesda is described exactly the way other Asclepions in the ancient world were constructed. So the temple at the Pool of Bethesda would have been smaller or more modest than most of the other temples that were there, but it was everything that was taking place there was in accordance to what would happen in one of these healing places. The people would be there, they would be dressed in their normal apparel, they would lay down on the floor or on a pallet, which is where Jesus found the man in this story. At night, the lights were then extinguished, and the people were left into a dark place, or a place where in this particular place where they were in the shade or in the shadows. So they're in this kind of quiet place where they are allowed to drift in and out of this dream state. And it's in this place and in this time that the power of suggestion, people believe that they get touched by the god Asclepius. And so here, the visitors to this particular Asclepia included a great multitude of sick people, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed. They were all in various stages of illness, serious illness. In addition to the infirm, numbers of healthy persons came to worship the god there to ensure their continued good health and protect their families. So people would come there to relax and enjoy the waters that were there, and it would be a place like a spa, modern day spa today. And some of these Asclepians that are found in the ancient world were built near hot springs. So then too, of course, there would be worship services and lectures from the priests and the singing designed to help put the worshipers in a proper mental attitude for whatever steps they needed to follow to receive their healing. In this particular place at the Pool of Bethesda, the infirm would lay on these pallets beside the pool, and they would wait for hours sometimes for an angel to come down. And what this angel was, we don't know, but something would happen that would stir the waters in the pool. And when the waters became stirred up, whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well from whatever it was that they were sick from. So unlike the modern medical establishments, the Greek recognized the limitations of science, and they often put science and faith together, and that's where they would meet here at the Asclepius, the idea of medical science and place of healing, and also of supernatural healing. So now we know, of course, that these idols are powerless to heal anyone. But it is not unreasonable to expect that a certain percentage of those who worship the Greek god of healing would respond to the spiritual and psychosomatic influences of the Asclepion, and which is kind of where this guy was at there. And so the first essential towards receiving the power of Jesus is to have an intense desire for it. That's why Jesus says, man, do you really want to be changed? If in our inmost hearts we are well contented to stay as we are, there can be no change for us. That was from William Barclay. So Jesus is doing something here. There is something that's taking place. There's a reason why Jesus has gone to this place of pagan worship. You know, that would be the first question that anyone would ask is, why would Jesus, the Son of God, go to a place of such spiritual darkness as an Asclepion? Why would he go there? Well, it's very clear from the other teachings of Jesus and from the parables he told that Jesus went to this place to go in search of the lost sheep of the house of Israel. There were many people that were there at that Asclepion that needed healing, but Jesus went to this one man. And and he went to this one man to heal him. And like in Luke 19:9 and 10, when Jesus healed another person, he said, Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save what is lost. So here we see that Jesus goes to this specific place and finds this specific person and heals them. And that is because he is a lost sheep of the house of Israel. And Jesus set the example for us, ignoring religious prejudice, and he went to the place where the need was greatest. No self-respecting Jewish person would step into an Asclepion, into a Greek temple. And that's why it's so important to understand that this was outside of the walls of Jerusalem, just outside the gate at the time that this was taking place, because the Jews would not allow a pagan temple to be built inside the walls at that time. But it was only later, after this, after the 70 AD, that as the walls were expanded, that this got to be inside the walls there. So it's important to understand that. So Jesus is approaching this gate, and he goes into this place, into this pagan temple. Now, there's also significance about this, is because later on, as the apostles spread out into the Greek world, into the pagan world, they would encounter people who were in need of healing. They would encounter people who were worshiping at temples and at pagan places, and they should not be held back from seeking and saving the lost from every nation, tribe, and tongue, wherever they would enter. So Jesus is showing an example here by going in there. A son of Abraham, to have been in that place, in that pool in Bethesda, where it was a place of pagan healing, he would have had to have been very desperate to go in there. And certainly this man was, as he had been for 38 years, he had been there as a child of Abraham. He would have been in there seeking healing. So, of course, the Jews believed that he was in this condition because he was a hopeless sinner. The religious leaders at the temple in Jerusalem believed that this man was being punished for his sins, and by being afflicted with this injury or sickness or whatever the purpose is. And as a lame person, he would have been excluded from entering into the inner courts of the temple. So the sick and the blind and the lame, since they were not allowed past the court of the Gentiles in the temple in Jerusalem, this man was desperate enough to go seek his healing in another place. And he was someone who would have been excluded from the community of worshipers, and they were not allowed to enter the place where the sacrifices in the temple in Jerusalem were taking place. So it's quite possible that he felt that he had no choice but to go to this pagan temple, this pagan place of healing, where his prayers might be answered. So the son of Abraham was so lost, of course, that he had no idea who it was that healed him. Jesus never did anything in a haphazard or random way. So, of course, when the fullness of time would come, Jesus was born, he was baptized, he was revealed to the nation. We've seen all of that taking place in these first 4 chapters. And we see also in these first 4 chapters that he needed to go through Samaria. Why? Because he had a divine appointment to keep with his lonely, sin-struck woman in Sychar. Now he arrives at this pool at Bethesda at the precise moment he needed to be there. for this lost sheep of the house of Israel to find him. So leaving the 99 in search of the one, all of what Jesus was teaching, this is a practical application of that. So Jesus selected a Sabbath time. He specifically picks this day to heal the man because it was set up, as I said before, it was set up his next confrontation with the Jewish authorities there. So we continue on with this. Now, the Jews therefore said to the man who was cured, "It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed." He answered them, "He who made me well said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" Then they asked him, "Who is this man who said to you, 'Take up your bed and walk'?" But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, a multitude being in that place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, "See, you have been made well. Sin no more, least a worse thing come upon you." The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. For this reason, the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered and said to them, "My Father has been working until now, and I have been working." Therefore, the Jews sought all the more to kill him, because not only had he broke the Sabbath, but also said that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. So Jesus has done this thing on this particular day with this particular lost sheep of the house of Israel that he has gone in search of. He has done this because not only because of his compassion for this particular person, but also because it was going to set up his next major confrontation, speaking the truth to the power elite that were in control of the temple. So, of course, as the story continues, you find this man who was healed, you find him where he was supposed to be, where he ought to be. He's a child of the son of Abraham. Where should he be? In a pagan temple, or in the temple in Jerusalem? Of course, obviously, he should be in the temple worshiping the true God. You think back just on the previous chapter, where Jesus told the Samaritan woman, "You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." And so he said to the man at Bethesda, he says to him, see, you have been made well. Sin no more, at least a worse thing come upon you." Now, again, it was a clear warning from Jesus not to break the foundational commandment of God. What is that foundational commandment? "Thou shalt not have any gods before me." God's commandments, the 10 Commandments, begin with the Lord commanding his people not to make idols, not to worship idols, not to have any gods before him. So Jesus is warning this man, don't go back to these pagan temples and places of worship. Don't break this commandment of God. So, of course, because of the location of this pool at Bethesda being right there just outside the gates of the city, outside the walls of the city, it was not very long before the religious watchdogs, the Pharisees, the scribes, the priests, the keepers of the Jewish religion, they saw this man carrying his bed on a Sabbath, and of course when they learned the story of what happened and why he was carrying his pallet, rather than rejoicing over this lost sheep of the house of Israel that had been healed and was now returning to the sheepfold, the religious leaders were offended at that moment. They were offended that he was doing something that the law said he should not do on the Sabbath. And it was their law, not Moses' law, that said that. So the moment this man informed the watchdogs that it was Jesus who had healed them and told them to take up their bed and walk, you can immediately see, okay, another confrontation is going to come between Jesus and these Pharisees over the Sabbath, and what does all this mean? So when as soon as they find out it was Jesus, they confronted him. Jesus is not hiding anywhere. He's right there in the temple area, and they confront Jesus, and and about this. And Jesus answered them with a statement that if it were not true, it would have been blasphemous. And that's what he says, my Father has been working until now, and I have been working. And of course, the Jews really clearly understood what Jesus was saying there. There's a lot of people who say, well, Jesus never said he claimed he was the Son of God. That was something that came later. No, the Jews understood exactly what Jesus was saying here, which is why they wanted to kill him at this moment. Because by identifying God as his Father, he was clearly identifying himself as being equal with God. And of course, the Jews understood that language and understood the thought there. So Jesus is saying that God's work is his work, or his work is God's work. So therefore, what he was doing was above their authority and could not be questioned by them. If the authorities could have put their hands on Jesus at that moment, they would have killed him for blasphemy there. But of course, Jesus' time was not yet. He was not completed with the work that he had come to do. So you can see that in the mind of the Jewish leaders, the religious leaders, Jesus had not only broken Sabbath regulations, but he had blasphemed by making himself equal with God. And so we see here one of the fundamental claims of the Christian faith, that is the divine nature and human nature come together in Jesus Christ. The Father and the Son, the Logos, are truly and eternally one. The implications of that declaration that Jesus is God, that declaration has shaken the foundations of every false religion, every human philosophy, and every government of man that is opposed to the gospel that the Son of God came in human flesh. It is the truth of that declaration that has separated those who insist on trying to process rationally or logically that idea of Jesus being God. It's not something that can be logically or rationally derived from. It can only be understood if it is supernaturally revealed by God into the spirit of man. It's from the spirit of God to the spirit of man that this revelation comes. And to this day, the gospel narrative remains the same, that by his life, sacrificial death on the cross, and his resurrection, Jesus affirms his deity to all. And that is a hope and our confidence upon which every Christian, every believer stands. So let's continue to look at this confrontation, how Jesus answers it. How does Jesus respond with the truth of that? So Jesus answered and said, that most surely I say to you, the Son of Man can do nothing by himself, or nothing of himself. But what he sees the Father do, for whatever he does, the Son also does in a like manner. For the Father loves the Son and shows him all things that he himself does, and he will show him greater works than these, that you may marvel. So so this particular passage, as we go through, there are three things that we want to highlight out of there. There are three fundamental truths in this passage, verses 19 through 29, that we want to highlight at this place. In these particular verses, these are three fundamental truths that Jesus spoke about himself in response to those who questioned him. First, he said the Son can do nothing of himself. That's in verse 19. So Jesus and the Father are one. Whatever the Father does, the Son does. The works of God are demonstrated in his Son, even unto the raising of the dead. So you see that Jesus and the Father are one. The second point to highlight from Jesus' defense is that the Father has given the judgment of the living and the dead to his Son. That's in verse 22. So whoever hears Jesus' words and believes in the Father who sent him has everlasting life. which is a foundational statement, of course, in John's gospel. So whoever believes in Jesus and turns to him for salvation shall not come into judgment, but he has been passed from death unto life. And what Jesus did at Bethesda was much more than just healing one man. He has demonstrated for all by this sign that he has the authority and the ability and the power to not only heal, but to give eternal life to all who believe in him. So the Father, and the third point here from verse 27 onward is the Father has given all authority to the Son. Even the power of life itself is in Jesus Christ. So because the Father and the Son are one, the Son of Man has the authority of the Father to judge the living and the dead. Even the dead will hear the voice of the Son of God, the voice of Jesus Christ at the end, at the time of the resurrection. So these are very powerful statements that Jesus has made. And these statements that he is making is just absolutely just shaking these Pharisees and priests and all who heard it, is just shaking them to the very core of what they believe. Continuing on down with this defense that Jesus has made, in verses 30 through 39, he says, I can of myself do nothing. As I hear, I judge, and my judgment is righteous, because I do not seek my own, but the will of the Father who has sent me. If I bear witness of myself, my witness is not true. There's another who bears witness of me, and I know that the witness which he witnesses of me is true. And so here, now, if you think about it, at the end of his time on earth, his last visit to Jerusalem, when Jesus is arrested and he is dragged in front of the entire Sanhedrin to be tried for blasphemy. At that time, Jesus was not given a fair trial. He was not given the opportunity to defend himself. Only false witnesses would come forward, and only they would be allowed to speak in this mock trial that was put on by the Sanhedrin. And of course, the guilty verdict was already a foregone conclusion before Jesus was allowed to speak in his defense. But if Jesus had been allowed to defend himself in a fair trial before the Sanhedrin, this probably would have been his defense. I mean, this sounds like his defense at this point, and because Jesus is saying that that those who sat in judgment of him for blasphemy, that Jesus' testimony about himself was confirmed by 3 witnesses. And of course, in any Jewish court of law, and even we have that today, the truthfulness of the testimony of a witness on trial has to be confirmed by 2 or 3 witnesses to be legally established as factual. And so here in this passage of scripture, Jesus identifying for all the confirmation of 3 witnesses concerning his claim to have the authority of the Father. So his first witness, the first witness was John the Baptist. And we see that in verse 33 of this passage. All the Jewish religious leaders, they knew that John was held in high regard by the people. He was indeed a prophet sent from God. No one challenged that there. So, and we see this in those verses of scripture that I put there for you. John's testimony concerning Jesus being the Son of God would have been considered a greater testimony, a more important testimony than any ordinary person would have been. So we see that John's status and his recognition as a prophet of God would have been unquestioned. So his testimony concerning Jesus would have been without question. The second testimony that Jesus gave is that the very fact that he was the Son of God was borne out by the works that he did. Remember in his confrontation with Nicodemus, when Nicodemus began, so I say, no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him. So the signs and the miracles that Jesus was performing were witness to the fact that he was indeed the Son of God. And if that wasn't enough for them, for these Jewish leaders, the Father himself testified that Jesus was his Son. And again, we see that in Matthew 3:17 and in other places where the Father speaks and says, "This is my Son, listen to him." So this would have been Jesus' defense and this is Jesus' defense before them at this time, confirming that he was indeed who he said he was. So we continue on. Jesus continues, and now he's turning the tables. He's accusing those who are his accusers. He says, "But you're not willing to come to me that you may have life. I do not receive honor from men, but I know you, that you do not have the love of God in you. I have come in my Father's name, and you do not receive me. If another one comes in his own name, him you will receive. How can you believe who receive honor from one another and do not seek the honor that comes from the only God? Do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moses, in whom you trust. For if you had believed Moses, you would have believed me, and for he wrote about me. But you do not believe his writings. How will you believe my words?" So as if it wasn't enough of the talking about those witnesses, those three witnesses that came before him, Jesus ends this confrontation, kind of puts the final nails in his argument against these Jewish religious leaders with two things that were specially given to the Jews to testify to the truth of what Jesus was saying. Of course, the scriptures and Moses both confirmed that Jesus is the Messiah. And Jesus, in his confrontation, says, if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. But they don't really believe Moses, and so they don't believe him. So how would they believe Jesus' words? That really cut these Jews right to the heart, and it cut them to the heart and to the quick, and it pricked their consciences. Now, we can go even deeper into the whole spiritual truth in the background of what is taking place here in this whole miracle and what has happened here. Because remember, John's gospel is more of a universal gospel. So this gospel is going out into the pagan world. So what did this story of this man who has been healed by the pool at Bethesda in that day, what is the deeper spiritual truth that would have been seen behind all of this for those in the pagan world who heard about this and when this was testified of? See, the truth of this particular story goes beyond the power and the authority of the Son of Man to heal one paralyzed person. Although the pool of Bethesda was a real place and the event that John described was real, the place and the healing in the pagan world would have represented to that world that the Son of God was born to redeem and to save. Jesus, the divine Logos, left his eternal throne in heaven and came to a sick and idolatrous world in need of saving, just as Jesus that day went to that place of pagan worship, and he went there to redeem a lost sheep. So the divine Logos left his eternal throne in heaven, and he came to the sick world that needed healing. And when he came to the pool, which is a place of supernatural healing by a false pagan god of Asclepius, of course, no one recognized Jesus at that time, not even his own, not only his own sheep, No one recognized who he was. No one acknowledged him. He came into that place almost anonymously, that he walked into that place. And there Jesus saw this man laying on a pallet. And to the pagan mind, this would have brought the image of a funeral. This is the way funerals would be taking place. The man that Jesus healed laying on a pallet was as good as dead. To the ancient Greeks and the Egyptians and the Romans, the image of the man lying on his bed certainly could have conjured up, or would have conjured up, the picture of a dead man on his funeral bier, waiting to be carried into the afterlife. And the pagans believed that the god of the underworld must carry the dead to their final resting place. So remember this man by the pool, he said, I want to get healed. I want to have this new life, but there's no one who can carry me into the pool of water. There's nobody who can carry me there. The pagans would have understood that it was like they believed in the god of the underworld was the ferryman, was the man who would ferry them across the river Styx into the place of the underworld, where the life in the underworld. And so here we see Jesus speaking to this man, this lost sheep, the house of Israel, who said that no one would carry him into the healing waters, or if he died, there was no one there to carry him into the afterworld. So instead of the god Asclepius speaking to this man, the man heard the voice of Jesus speaking to him. And as if in a dream, Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be made whole again?" And the moment Jesus touched him, health and life was restored to him. It was as if he had been born again. The image of this man rising from his sickbed and stepping into the newness of life is a sign to the world that the Son of God had come to deliver from sin and death all who would believe in him. It was as if this man had been born again. He was stepping into the newness of life, the sign to the world that the Son of God had come. So to make sure that none of this was missed, Jesus spoke at this moment. He spoke of his authority to make life and death judgments, and his power to raise to the dead, in his answer to those who question his actions that day. This whole incident, what had taken place, the images about this, how Jesus described what had taken place, and his authority over life and death, all of this would have spoken volumes to the pagan world as the gospel is now spread out of Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria to the outermost parts of the world. This story resonates to those who are seeking a new life. Jesus knew at that time that where he was giving his defense, that those men in those time and place in Jerusalem, those religious leaders, refused to believe anything that he said. And part of the reason why they refused to believe him is because they were so zealous to protect and preserve their religious traditions that they had lost their love for God that they claimed to serve. It's like this man who was laying by the pool at Bethesda. And when Jesus asked him, "Do you want to be made well?" Rather than immediately say, "Yes, Lord, I want to be made well," he says, "Well, I can't let go of the tradition. I have to get into the water at a certain time in a certain way. When the pool is stirred up by this angel, I have to get in the pool at this time." And it's like the religious traditions that prevent people from seeing the broader picture and seeing Jesus when he's right there in front of them. And so we see now how Jesus is communicating these thoughts and these ideas in this particular place and time. And so the Pharisees and the scribes and the teachers in the law and all those who ministered at the temple in Jerusalem, they were really no different from the Samaritans who worshiped God on their mountains. Both sides claimed to believe the law of Moses, but by their actions, they proved that they had forgotten the truth contained in the word of God that was given to Moses. So not only did they refuse to believe the written word of God, but they also refused to believe the living word in Jesus Christ, who was there before him when he was speaking to them. So Jesus acted on the Sabbath, asserting his lordship over that holy day every day. The nature of this miracle of restoring a hopeless invalid suggests what Christ's power can do if we heed the gospel call to arise and walk with him throughout life and on to the resurrection life to come. So Jesus departed the company with these religious hypocrites. He left them in the dust, sitting like whitewashed tombs, appearing beautiful on the outside, but they are full of dead men's bones. So his confrontations with these, it's like the confrontations with the wicked vine dressers that Jesus described in his parable. The father's vineyard, who had seized the father's vineyard and killed the servants that were sent to him. And Jesus' confrontation with these wicked vine dressers was not over yet. When all was said and done, the Jewish authorities rejected Jesus, not because they did not believe who he was, but because they knew very well who he was. Just that was the point of the parable of the wicked vine dressers. They understood that he was God's son. They understood that he had the authority. They could hear his words, and his words resonated in them and as being true. And he had the authority. He had the testimony of the three witnesses, and the Moses and the very law spoke of him. So they, by the end of Jesus' words to them, they were convinced who he was, but they could not welcome him because he threatened their wealth and their power. And the fact that Jesus exposed their hypocrisies and their sins for all to see, because Jesus was doing this, they came to despise Jesus and looked for their best chance to destroy him. And so we see in this confrontation in John chapter 5, how Jesus is now directly addressing the hypocrisy of the Jews who had seized God's vineyard, and how he had come to seek and save what was lost. So that's it, ladies and gentlemen.